400 new hires. At the same time, 14% of the workforce just got cut. That's not a typo. That's the US Space Force in 2026, simultaneously shrinking and scrambling to grow. And the gap between those two numbers is where a real national security story lives. In the next few minutes, you'll see why civilian employees, not astronauts, not guardians, are the people holding American space operations together, and why losing them even briefly creates the kind of damage that takes years to undo. On April 10, 2026, STARCOM Commander Major General James E. Smith made a public announcement. The Space Training and Readiness Command was opening more than 400 civilian positions: acquisition specialists, cybersecurity analysts, intelligence officers, testing engineers. The announcement would have been unremarkable, except that it came directly after Pentagon budget cuts had slashed STARCOM's civilian workforce by 14%. Not a hiring freeze, not a slowdown, a reduction in a branch of the military that was already trying to scale up. The Space Force currently fields roughly 14,000 active duty guardians and approximately 4,000 civilian employees. Civilians make up one-third of STARCOM's entire workforce. That 14% cut didn't just reduce headcount, it punched a hole in the operational core of the youngest branch of the American military. The Space Force was established precisely because space had become a contested domain. Satellites guide missiles. They coordinate communications. They provide the GPS signals that modern logistics, military and civilian, depend on entirely. Most people's mental image of space is still Neil Armstrong planting a flag. The reality of space operations in 2026 is a 24-hour infrastructure problem with national security stakes. Someone has to make sure satellites don't get hacked. Someone has to verify that launch systems perform under pressure. Someone has to ensure the data streaming down from orbit is actually usable. That work falls to civilian employees. And here's the part that rarely surfaces in coverage of military budgets. Civilian expertise in space operations is often irreplaceable in ways that military rotations simply cannot cover. A Guardian, an active duty Space Force member, rotates assignments every few years. That's how military careers are structured, but satellite acquisition programs can run for a decade. Cybersecurity threat landscapes shift continuously. Testing and analysis on new launch vehicles requires institutional memory that survives personnel changes. Civilian employees carry that continuity. They remember why a system was designed a certain way. They know the contractors. They've built relationships with the intelligence community over years. When you cut 14% of that workforce, you don't just lose bodies and chairs. You lose accumulated knowledge that took years to build and cannot be quickly replaced. The 400 position hiring surge is happening across several specific locations, and the geography tells its own story about where American space power is concentrated. Patrick Space Force Base in Florida, Schriever Space Force Base in Colorado, Vandenberg Space Force Base in California, Joint Base Andrews in Maryland. These represent launch infrastructure, satellite command, testing ranges, and policy coordination, a deliberate national footprint. Patrick is especially significant right now. In March 2026, a new STARCOM headquarters annex opened there. STARCOM is in the middle of a phased relocation, moving its headquarters from Peterson Space Force Base in Colorado to Patrick in Florida. A transition expected to be complete by 2027. Several hundred personnel are set to move into the new facility in the coming months. So the organization is doing two things at once: rebuilding its civilian workforce after the cuts and physically restructuring its command headquarters. That's not a small operational lift. The hiring surge and the relocation are happening simultaneously, which means every open seat carries extra weight. The roles being filled span acquisition, intelligence, testing analysis, and cybersecurity, the exact specialties that were eroded by the budget cuts. The surge isn't just about filling seats. It's about rebuilding institutional depth that was lost faster than anyone publicly acknowledged. The STARCOM hiring push reflects something larger. The boundary between civilian space science and national security space has been blurring for years. In 2026, it's nearly gone. The same orbital lanes that carry weather satellites carry reconnaissance assets. The same launch providers sending science payloads to orbit are launching military satellites. The expertise required to operate in that environment, technical, legal, diplomatic, cybersecurity, is civilian expertise. When a military space command needs to hire 400 civilians urgently and publicly, It's a signal that space has become too complex and too fast moving to be managed by uniformed personnel alone. The frontier isn't just about who reaches the moon or Mars first. It's about who can sustain, protect, and operate the infrastructure that makes modern life on Earth function. Budget decisions made without operational context create gaps. Commanders like Major General James E. Smith then have to fill those gaps urgently, at scale, in public. That cycle, cut, then surge, is expensive in ways that don't show up cleanly on a budget line. Institutional knowledge lost to a 14% reduction doesn't come back the moment a new hire signs their paperwork. The next chapter of space operations won't be written only by astronauts. A significant portion of it will be written by the analysts, engineers, and cybersecurity specialists now being recruited to fill those 400 seats at Patrick, Schriever, Vandenberg, and Andrews. Two numbers define this moment: 14% lost, 400 needed. The distance between them is a portrait of how space policy actually works and what it costs when budget decisions outrun strategic ones. If you want more stories like this, the ones behind the headlines, told straight, subscribe to FactStormHub. The full article, with sources, is at factstormhub.com.